Today we have Bishop Barron alongside Jonathan Pageau, and if you're not familiar, Bishop Barron is a theologian, while Jonathan Pageau is an artist who's primarily focused with the art of symbolism, its importance, its implications in the modern world and the historic world, and they have a very unique segment here regarding materialism, and I wanted to dig into this with you guys because I feel like materialism and idealism is often the dichotomy between atheism and theism, so I think that there's a lot that we can figure out, explore, and would love to know your thoughts on. So we'll just dig right in and we'll get to it.
It's such a rich vein to be mining here, because think of materialism, which is the dominant philosophy of the secular world. It's, in biblical terms, earth has moved off here and heaven is up there somewhere in some fantasy world. When in fact, what the scientists investigate is heaven. They're investigating intelligibility, intelligible patterns, which are non-reducible to matter, right? They're kind of above, they're an organizing principle of matter. And so you can't really do science even without heaven.
No.
And there I think of that famous essay by Eugene Wigner. You know, he was a secular Jewish scientist, a contemporary of Niels Bohr and those people. But what he was noticing in his physics was mathematics. You can't do physics without the highest mathematics. So he writes an article called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Physical Sciences. And what he's not a religious man, he says that, but he's wondering at it. And he uses the word miracle over and over again. How miraculous that as we look at the physical world, we have to use achingly high mathematics to describe it.
Yeah.
Well, see, I would say in biblical terms, that's the logos, right, which creates all things, endowing them with intelligibility. And then Adam, who names the animals. That's the move, isn't it? The Father saw him as the scientist, philosopher, right? But see, it's fallen apart.
I totally agree, and it's funny.
Okay, I just wanted to pause here before we let Jonathan go very briefly because there are a few important things to pick up on. So interestingly, Bishop Barron actually almost takes a secular approach here by confiding with the atheist/materialist thought by saying, yes, typically we imagine heaven as being out there. It's hysterical. It's just a mystery. It has all of these obscure elements that are apart from the natural world. And of course, he uses that to steelman the argument from the theologian side that actually the natural world and heaven are intertwined. This is often an argument that theists will tend to make, that it's not something that's out there, but actually heaven and hell reside in the same place, but they're more symbolic. They're not an actual place that you go to. So that's just one thing to decipher, to pick up on, and to explore there. And the reason why I want to make note of that is because oftentimes, at least that I've found with these debates between materialism, idealism, again, atheism and theism, is that there is a level of analysis problem. It's a linguistic problem that people are having where people will use representations for concepts, such as, let's just go back to heaven and hell, for example, and then the materialist will be like, okay, where's the fire? Where are the clouds that exist? But then the theist will instead be like, no, it's a state of mind, it's a being, it's a element of the world that far exceeds our own senses. So it's very interesting to see this dynamic, and this is what I find that a lot of these debates do, is they just kind of talk past each other. But we'll let Jonathan go here. I just want to pick up on that first.
In some ways, it's a blind spot of the materialist. It's like it's as if they can't see that they need identities and they need these structures, and what they're looking for is regularity in the world, and that regularity manifests itself as a cohesive pattern of being. And that is exactly what, if you read St. Maximus, you read some of the church fathers, that's what they're talking about. And you read the Neoplatonists, that's what they're talking about. It's not because the materialist wants to at least, the thrust is to reduce everything to these kind of mechanical causation.
Right.
They want spirit to be something that acts like mechanical causation, but it isn't. It's the binding of identity. It's the binding of name. It's the binding of purpose that makes you actually see that something, like let's say a scientist is a good example. For a scientist to study something, they already have to identify it.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you're studying flowers, you're not studying rhinoceroses. And so you have to say, oh, I'm studying a flower that binds the phenomena into a pattern, and then you analyze phenomena to see in what way it fits with the pattern.
Yeah.
If it doesn't fit with the pattern, you have to either change your theory or you have to adjust the way you're studying it. But that's actually the union of heaven and earth that's described in Genesis 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if you...
Again, we'll let Bishop Barron go after as well, but this is so intriguing because That is very contentious. There's so many people that would agree wholeheartedly with what Jonathan is saying, and some people that will vehemently disagree. And again, I think it does go back to the language that we use to describe the phenomenon. I really want to pick up on the concept of a flower. He makes a great note here, especially from like the Platonic point of view, that the concept of a flower exists in a theory of forms, as Plato might say, but the scientist himself, herself, whomever, might actually go about the flower and say, no, all that exists is just the flower. Anything that we imagine just exists in our minds. There's no actual realm or concept or set whereby this exists elsewhere. And Jonathan's making an interesting approach by saying, well, we naturally, whether we're aware of it or not, abstract concepts, and that's how we actually view the world, because that is the identity by which we are interpreting and experiencing the world through. Let's go back to the ancient Greeks, for example. So the ancient Greeks said that beauty itself was actually the flowering of a virtue, or virtue in and of itself. And what I find very cool about this, at least from the Platonic point of view, again, if we're going to stay on theme, is that beauty holds a conceptual space for us to recognize what is virtuous, what is real, what is natural to the world, without actually having fragments of it or sensations of it right in front of us. Because the beauty isn't in the flower in and of itself. The beauty is an experience that we're having of the flower. It's kind of like an interpretation. It's a medium that we interact with by way of interacting with a flower. But I do want to make a deeper point about identities. And I think we anthropomorphize the objects, the interactions, the phenomena that we experience because we want them to have some sort of bearing on our own identity. We want to see the beauty in the flower because we want to see the beauty in ourselves, or the concept of a flower because we want to see ourselves as a cohesive and united whole. And I think that is the relationship, that's the tension that we're always experiencing with the separations between ourselves and the things we are seeing or feeling through our senses. And this cohesiveness that Jonathan Pageau actually makes a very, very intriguing note of and important note of is that it gives us directionality. And that, what I mean by that specifically actually is that directionality is actually a form of uniformity of the world so that we understand how to interpret the unknown. You can't look at a flower once and say, okay, it has this leaf and this color in this way. Okay, then I look at the next plant here. Is this a flower? No, we have a cohesive and identifying way of understanding and interpreting phenomena across time, across space, across so many of these domains. And I think that is what he's pointing the finger on when it comes to what is symbolic, that the concept sits above the representation, the physical representation itself. Now, I'll of course let Jonathan speak more on the symbolism. He is the instructor there. But I do find this, again, to be a very prime topic of debate when it comes to these arguments. And a lot of times the materialists will just throw it all out and say, you know what, enough with this wish-wash, enough with the stuff that sits on top, enough with these concepts. These are just constructs of the mind. They don't actually exist. And then sometimes a theist, if being critical, will say, no, they don't literally exist in the time-space domain that we experience other things, but they exist as an identifiable concept where we see the world through, because it is often known that we do see the world through the lens of a story, through a narrative. And that narrative is a cohesive pattern recognition idea of how we see the world at large, from its microcosms to its macrocosms. So we'll see what Bishop Barron says.
I wonder if you agree with this. This oldest problem in philosophy in a way is how to bring together soul and body. How do you think them together? You have Descartes' famous solution through the pineal gland in the brain. The ghost of the machine links up to the body and all this stuff. The solution to all that is, don't think of matter and spirit as two phenomena within one plane. Yeah. One's like at a higher dimension of existence.
There it is.
So just as a line can contain an infinity of points because it's a higher dimension, the cube can include an infinity of squares. It's a higher dimension. That the pattern isn't alongside of matter. It's higher than matter. It organizes it. So all these questions that are predicated upon competition, how do we think them together? Don't play that game. That's the wrong game.
Yeah, it's really constraint on multiplicity. That's for a modern person. It's probably the best way to understand it is that there are constraints on multiplicity, which brings it together and makes it act together into one body.
Yeah.
And that's what heaven is. And it appears at every level of being. And it's difficult for people to understand because, let's say, in the world, let's say you exist in a country, right? And that country is a little bit of heaven in the sense that the country binds all of us together, brings us together. Now, the country also has physical phenomena, right? And so that's what makes it difficult for people to understand that there are things that actually have physical phenomena above us, but that constrain us and act in a manner that's heaven. But the way it constrains is invisible. You can't...
Right.
Like, there's nothing... How can I say this? Like, there's nothing in a country that makes it exist as a country which can be completely contained by visibility.
Right.
It's like, why do I recognize an American if we're both in Italy? It's because there's an invisible constraint on us.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That was an intriguing way to put it as well, that by definition, this idealistic way of viewing things, this conceptual way of viewing sets, is going to be invisible by default, that there's almost no way around that, that is the ineffable, again, by definition. And I these terminologies tend to be very misleading, but also tend to be very compelling. So he uses the term constraints on multiplicity, which by definition would be correct. So we have, again, let's use Jonathan Pageau's example of, we have a concept of a country, and there's multiplicity that's involved in what it means to identify with a nation or a country, and what a country is beyond just the actual drawing of a border on a map. Of course, there's a symbolic element to the flag. There's the values that it obtains, the traditions that it upholds across time. And these are all intangible essences, which I would definitely agree with him with, in saying that these are all fundamentally a comprehensive component, a comprehensive idea of what it means for something to be a nation or something to be a country. And that is the abstract element. That is the form by which it exists. And that can't just be tossed away and say, oh, we have a drawing here and that's all there is. But what ends up happening is the materials will end up removing this higher order form into just what exists as the material. And again, all else being just a construct of the mind, which is something more to prod about, by the way. But then further, that the theist will, I think what turns off the materialist is that the theist will instead include and make the leap of divine intervention involved in such stories by saying, oh, it is invisible, so therein God fills in those blanks. Or the reason why it's there teleologically is because God has constructed the universe by way of intelligent design. And then you start getting into the semantics between God. And a lot of times, of course, in the religious canon, God will actually be the Christian God, for that matter, will actually be a virtue, an omnipotent being that is bestowing wisdom and grace and harmony and morality onto humanity and its subsequent parts. The concept of appealing, let's use that term, appealing to a grander design or a divine nature can both be very courageous, intricate, detailed, and critical, but it could also be very sloppy. And I think that that's the problem, especially in the scientific domain with their interpretation of these uses and terminologies, because we can encapsulate the term of a country of multiplicity, as Jonathan Pageau had put it, without all these religious presuppositions. Like, why do we need grace, and why do we need God, and why do we need the canon, and why do we need commandments to tell us, when I could just understand that there are these sets mathematically that exist in the world, and I can interpret them as is without having to appeal to some higher order being, divinity, magic for some, and for others it's real, tangible, comprehensive understanding of themselves and how the world works. That's what I really want to get at the heart of this debate, which I don't see happening very, very often. It's so important to understand that we do view the world through the lens of a story, and in that lens of a story, we see ourselves in it through identity. That is how we experience the world itself. That's literally how we predict the world. That's how we engage with the unknown, is by saying, okay, we have this understanding of the world. We understand what things are poisonous and dangerous. We understand what is conducive to our well-being, what makes us feel good, and we will try to find replicas. We will try to find patterns across time so as to how to predict our experience in the future, to engage with the world in ways where we can experience the rose, look at it with its beauty without getting pricked by the thorn, I think is a symbolic way, for lack of a better term, to put it. But I want to see Bishop Barron's response here.
For a second, because David Tracy, now long retired, but professor at the University of Chicago, one of the most prominent theologians of the last 50 years, he wrote an article where he said, today, the prime access to the invisible is mathematics. Mm-hmm. And he meant Wigner's point, that if you're doing mathematics, well, you've left the cave behind in Platonic language. You've moved into a higher mode of being. Yeah. And so
there's
mathematics does order you toward this world of patterns, this world of meaning. But somehow we think everything's reducible to the material, but you can't begin to analyze the material without some appeal to the numeric or the pattern, right? So Bertrand Russell, many years ago, the great atheist, said, I think mathematics is the prime source of belief in gods. Mm-hmm. And my answer is like, yeah, it's one of them. It's a route of access.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you're noticing something there. Mathematics is different than this world of ordinary, material experience. Hey, tell me before I forget about...
Okay. He's really trying to get the atheists on his side. He's not appealing to the theism or the canonical doctrines, if you may. You see that he's even calling upon Bertrand Russell there, the atheist, the mathematician, philosopher, in many cases, as a way to appeal to this notion that there is a higher order, to use the terminology once again, understanding of the world that supersedes that of just the material. Let's look at this from a logical/philosophical point of view. Mathematics at its core, of course, is a result of axiomatic claims, axiomatic understandings. And to further explore that, we need to understand what are axioms. And axioms are things in many cases that could be seen as self-evidence. They're truths that don't need proofs, that we just understand that exist. And then you get into these weird realm of contingencies and necessities. And it's interesting because I think there are baseline intuitions about the world that actually govern our perceptions. And that's typically another way to look at what axioms really are. They're these baseline understandings without any other further knowledge, without any external knowledge of the world. These understandings that allow us to interpret the world, again, back to Kant's impressions that we see that give us a framework to how we view things, but they're just truths in and of themselves. They're self-evident. They're very difficult, let's say, to even be questioned any further. And then the logical question, if permissible, is, well, where do these truths then exist if they're not existing in the material itself, like in the atoms themselves? Where are these truths? And that's where, of course, the theists will come in and be like, oh, welcome to divine intervention. Welcome to intelligent design. At face value is not a problem. I think the problem, well, if it is a problem, let's say, or something that at least needs further analysis, is can you do without the religious presuppositions and still accept this idealistic framework as a part of your understanding of the natural world, and understanding that there is something ineffable without the religious stories? I really do think that the crux of this all sits in the realm of morality, where I think that what we're asking of ourselves in these moments of, is there just the material or is there an ideal, is what does it mean for us specifically for there to be a material and for there to be an ideal? And we can insert the word significance into meaning, because that's really what we're asking of ourselves. Is this meaningful? Does this provide meaning? Is there meaning to this? Whichever way you want to phrase the word meaning, you can instead swap that word out with just significance. That's what we're looking for. Is this significant? Am I significant? Does this provide significance to the world as a result? And the significance, if we're going to loop right back around and go full circle, is directly correlated with our understanding of identity. I believe that this is the inceptual point of identity, where identity makes itself so pronounced to us, and why we have such a yearning for identity is because we want to have significance. We want to experience significance. And simply, I think on the atheist side of things and the ideal and the theist side or idealist side of things, you can often say that they're both searching for a form of identity, in that there's significance in their worldview, in what they are believing, and what they're feeling, and what they're experiencing. I think the leap that's then taken is if that significance is a moral one. So for the theist, in the ideal world, let's just say that there's a moral framework by which to live by, and that's why there is this ineffable, because it informs us what it means to live the good life, what the gods had provided for us, that there is the fruit of the gods that is then bestowed and given to us, and that is our way to adhere to it so we can live morally. But we'll stick with that there, and I really hope you enjoyed. I'd love to explore some more with you. Please let me know your thoughts and the arguments that you've come across while listening to this, and we'll see you on the next one. So remember to be human, and thank you so much.